The lonely road. The life of a long-haul truck driver is full of challenges. Long, monotonous hours on the road, days or weeks away from home and family. Despite this, as Mike L. recounts, truckers witness many unusual and sometimes inexplicable things on their journeys. But nothing could have prepared Mike for what he experienced one summer night at a remote truck stop in the middle of nowhere, a place where he would never have expected to encounter something so unsettling. The isolated stop. I'm a long-haul truck driver, covering all 48 states in the southern U.S. I've seen some strange things, but nothing compares to what I found in Palestine, Arkansas, back in June 2011, Mike recalls. He was on the third day of a long trip from Detroit, Michigan, to Houston, Texas, and was beginning to feel the weight of the long hours behind the wheel. When he spotted a small truck stop off the I-40, he decided it would be the place to rest for the night. The stop was small, with space for only about a dozen trucks, and it gave off an uncomfortable atmosphere from the moment he arrived. The bathrooms were filthy, the walls covered in graffiti, and the whole place felt abandoned. Mike bought something to eat, returned to his truck, and settled into the cab, trying to ignore the nagging sense that something wasn't right. The first sign. After finishing his meal and smoking a cigarette while watching the sunset, Mike changed into his pajamas and went to sleep. Hours later, he was startled awake by a violent shaking of the truck, which knocked a water bottle to the floor. Must be the wind, he thought. But when he looked out the window, he noticed that the wind had completely stopped. Curious and uneasy, he stepped outside to investigate. Grabbing his flashlight, he scanned around the truck and spotted a figure in the field a few yards away. It was a young woman with long hair, standing completely still. "Hey, are you all right?" he called out. But as he blinked, she vanished. The voice in the night. When Mike returned to the truck, still feeling unsettled, he heard a faint, childlike giggle. The sound seemed to come from inside the cab. Confused, he checked the truck's locks and found no one inside. "This is crazy," he muttered, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. "Good night," a soft, feminine voice said, emanating from all around him. Mike felt a chill run down his spine and turned quickly, but he was alone. The predatory stare. As he glanced out the window, he saw the young woman again, now much closer. Her eyes shone with an unnatural intensity, fixed on him. Without hesitation, Mike started the truck and drove off as fast as he could, the engine roaring as if it, too, wanted to escape. In the rearview mirror, he saw the girl waving at him, bathed in the red and amber glow of his tail lights. She was smiling, a smile that looked human but carried something predatory and inhuman. The warning. After driving for about an hour, Mike pulled into a larger, well-lit truck stop, trying to process what had happened. At dawn, something in the cab caught his attention. The knife he had purchased the previous day was embedded in his bedside table, piercing through a postcard from Arkansas. The tip of the blade marked the exact location of the first truck stop where he had spent the night. Trembling, Mike discarded both the knife and the postcard, but the event stayed with him like a shadow that refused to leave. Reflection. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night, Mike admits. I hear other truckers talk about strange things they've seen on the highways, interstates, and state roads, but I never share my story. I don't want to risk calling her back. Mike continues collecting postcards from his trips but has never bought another one from Arkansas. Raphael was an experienced truck driver, known for taking remote delivery routes no one else wanted. He enjoyed the solitude of the road, the sense of freedom that came with crossing miles of desolate landscapes. That night, he had accepted an unusual job, delivering a sealed container from Denver, Colorado, to a small town called Black Hollow in Kansas. The town wasn't on the map, but the client assured him it existed. The payment was too good to refuse. It was a dark, moonless night, with stars obscured by heavy clouds that threatened rain. Raphael turned on the radio to break the silence but quickly gave up when all he could find was static or music interrupted by interference. "It's just another delivery," he muttered to himself, adjusting the headlights to cut through the fog forming on the road. After hours of driving on increasingly narrow and darker roads, Raphael noticed something strange. He hadn't passed another vehicle since leaving the main highway. There were no house lights visible in the surrounding fields. It was as if he was driving into a void. Checking his GPS, he saw the route was constantly recalculating, as if he were lost. Worse still, the mileage marker didn't make sense. It indicated he was still 30 kilometers from Black Hollow, but no matter how far he drove, the number wouldn't change. He began to feel a growing unease. The road seemed to repeat itself. The same stretch of crooked trees and a rusty sign reading, "Caution, sharp curves ahead," kept appearing over and over. "Am I stuck in a loop?" he said aloud, trying to shake off the paranoia. But the feeling of being watched tightened around him like an invisible grip. After driving for several more hours, Raphael decided to stop and check the truck. He pulled over in a clearing by the roadside and stepped out with his flashlight. The wind carried an odd smell, metallic and sharp, that he couldn't place. As he inspected the tires, he heard faint footsteps behind him, like someone walking barefoot on the asphalt. He spun around and aimed his flashlight, but there was nothing there. The silence that followed was deafening. He chuckled nervously and climbed back into the cab, convincing himself it was just his imagination. But as he shut the door, he caught something in the side mirror, a figure standing in the middle of the road, just a few meters away. It appeared to be a woman, with long hair covering her face and wearing a tattered white dress. Raphael froze. The figure didn't move but seemed to be staring directly at him. Without thinking twice, he started the truck and sped away. When he glanced in the mirror again, she was gone. Back on the road, Raphael began to worry about the container's contents. He didn't know what he was transporting, only that he had been told under no circumstances to open it. Curiosity, combined with his growing fear, started to consume him. Shortly after, he heard a noise coming from the container, a low sound, like something dragging itself inside. Raphael slowed down, trying to hear better. The sound grew louder, almost like nails scratching against the metal walls. His mind raced. Is it some kind of animal? Why didn't they tell me about this? Suddenly, the headlights began to flicker, and the engine sputtered. Raphael struggled to control the truck as it rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. The darkness around him felt heavier, almost tangible. He stepped out again, this time armed with a crowbar he kept for protection. The silence was suffocating. Then he noticed something horrifying. There was no road behind or ahead of him. The asphalt had vanished, and he was surrounded by an endless, barren field. And then he heard it, laughter, distorted and echoing, coming from the container. It was human but wrong, like multiple voices laughing in dissonance. Panicked, Raphael ran back to the cab. As he tried to restart the engine, a loud bang came from the driver's door. He looked out the window and saw the same woman standing there, her black eyes staring into his soul. The radio, which had been off, suddenly crackled to life, emitting static that morphed into words. "Open the container. Set us free." Raphael knew he shouldn't, but the banging on the door grew louder, accompanied by voices whispering, laughing, and calling his name. With trembling hands, he stepped out and approached the container. As he unlocked it, the doors swung open with a deafening creak, revealing a void, complete darkness so deep it seemed to pull him in. Suddenly, something grabbed his arms and yanked him inside. Raphael tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the nothingness. Days later, Raphael's truck was found abandoned on the main highway, the container still sealed. There was no sign of the driver. Some people report seeing the truck on desolate roads, moving slowly, with the faint silhouette of a man in the driver's seat, as if trapped on a route with no end. Juliana was an experienced truck driver who thrived on night shifts. She wasn't afraid of solitude or empty roads. But that night, her route was different, a shortcut across the Bridge of Wales, an old structure in Cherokee County, Oklahoma. The bridge spanned the Illinois River and connected little-used backroads. Rumor had it the bridge was cursed, but Juliana didn't care for superstitions. All that mattered was delivering her load on time and getting paid. The bridge, according to the map, would cut 2 hours off her trip. She had to make it to Muskogee before sunrise. With rain beginning to fall and thunder cracking in the distance, she adjusted her headlights and pressed on. When she finally saw the Bridge of Wales, something about it felt wrong. It was an old, rusted iron structure with decaying wooden planks that stretched over the dark waters of the Illinois River. The surrounding landscape was barren, with dense forests looming in the distance. The only light came from her truck's high beams. A crooked, weathered sign stood at the entrance to the bridge. The faint lettering warned, "Cross at your own risk. Structure unstable." She hesitated. The wind howled through the bridge's framework, creating a sound that resembled a mournful wail. But Juliana didn't have time to turn back. "It's just an old legend," she muttered, shifting into gear and driving onto the bridge. Every plank creaked and groaned under the weight of her truck, amplified by the oppressive silence. The rain had stopped, but a dense fog began to rise from the river below, enveloping the bridge in an eerie shroud. Her headlights seemed weaker, as if the bridge itself absorbed the light. Halfway across, Juliana noticed something strange. Her GPS had stopped working. Worse, the horizon ahead appeared impossibly distant. No matter how far she drove, the end of the bridge never came into view. Then she noticed movement in her rearview mirror. At first, it was just a shadow in the fog. But as she looked closer, it began to take shape, figures, vaguely human, twisted and distorted. They moved unnaturally, with elongated limbs and glowing red eyes. They were closing in. The truck's radio, which had been silent, suddenly crackled to life with a burst of static. Through the interference, a cold, disembodied voice spoke, "You shouldn't be here." Juliana tried to turn it off, but the voice persisted. "Why didn't you stop? Why did you come here?" She screamed and slammed her fist on the dashboard. When she looked back at the road, she nearly lost control of the truck. A figure stood in the middle of the bridge, illuminated by her headlights. It was a woman in a tattered white dress, soaked and filthy. Her long, dark hair hung limply over her face, but Juliana could feel her eyes staring. "Get out of the way!" Juliana shouted, honking the horn. The figure didn't move. She swerved, but the truck skidded, slamming into the bridge's railing and teetering dangerously. Juliana fought to regain control, but then she felt something cold grab her arm. She turned to the passenger seat and saw a pale, waterlogged hand emerging from the cushion, gripping her tightly. She screamed, trying to pull away, but the hand's grip was unrelenting. Meanwhile, the truck began to slide backward, as though being dragged by an invisible force. Through the rearview mirror, she saw the shadows from before, now enveloping the rear of the vehicle. A cacophony of whispers, moans, and eerie laughter filled the air. Juliana awoke with a jolt. The truck was parked on a dirt road miles from where she remembered being. It was almost dawn, and the sky was beginning to lighten. Shaking, she stepped out to inspect the vehicle. The sides of the truck bore black handprints, as if something had tried to claw its way inside. When she looked around, there was no sign of the bridge. Instead, the Illinois River flowed peacefully, with no evidence of a structure ever having existed. She climbed back into the truck and drove to Muskogee, vowing never to take shortcuts again. But as she drove, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Glancing in her rearview mirror, she saw her, the woman in the white dress, standing by the roadside, watching her. To this day, the Bridge of Wales remains a mystery. Locals in Cherokee County claim the bridge collapsed decades ago, killing several people. Others swear it only appears to those who are desperate or lost. And everyone agrees on one thing: those who see the woman in white never leave unscathed.